My name is Ivy Calloway. I'm 29 years old. 4 months ago, my parents stood up at their 35th wedding anniversary dinner in front of 60 people and announced they were taking the whole family to Italy for 2 weeks. My brother cheered. My sister-in-law grabbed his arm and squealed. I sat at the far end of the table with a bread basket in my hand and felt something warm open up in my chest for the first time in years. Then my mother looked right at me and said, "Ivy, we'll need you to stay here with the kids, of course." 60 people heard that. 60 people watched me nod and say, "Of course." But here's what they didn't know. I had already been accepted into a graduate program in Charleston, South Carolina. I'd deferred for a year because my family needed me. I was 12 days from the deadline to confirm my enrollment. That night changed everything. Before I tell you what happened, let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what helping out actually looked like in my family. My parents live in a 4-bedroom house in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of neighborhood where everyone has a minivan and a Ring doorbell and knows what time the garbage truck comes. My father, Robert, worked 30 years in insurance before retiring 2 years ago. My mother, Cynthia, ran the household and 3 different church committees and had strong opinions about the correct way to fold napkins. Then there was my brother, Kevin, 33, married to his wife Ashley, who has a management job at a tech company downtown. They have 2 kids, a 7-year-old named Brody and a 5-year-old named Harper. Kevin sells medical equipment. He makes good money. He never mentions how much, but Ashley mentions it enough for both of them. And then there was me, the younger one, the flexible one, the one who moved back home at 24 after my first real job in marketing fell apart when the agency closed, and who somehow never fully left, even after I got back on my feet. I work remotely as a content writer. Steady clients, decent income, nothing that impresses anyone at Thanksgiving. My schedule is flexible, which my family interpreted as my schedule is available. Those 2 things are not the same. But I stopped correcting them a long time ago. Here is what helping out looked like. Easter Sunday, I arrive at 7 in the morning to start the ham and set the table. I coordinate the sides, time the rolls, arrange the centerpiece my mother ordered but didn't unwrap. Kevin and Ashley arrive at noon with the kids already in their Easter outfits, looking like a Pottery Barn catalog. Ashley kisses my mother on the cheek and hands her a bottle of wine. Kevin shakes my father's hand. Nobody asks what time I got there or whether I'd eaten breakfast. Brody's birthday party. I planned the superhero theme, ordered the invitations, baked the cake from scratch because Ashley mentioned she preferred homemade. I ran games for 11 7-year-olds for 3 hours, while Ashley sat with the other mothers talking about a home renovation. When the last kid left, Ashley looked around at the deflated balloons and said, "Thanks, Ivy. You're so good at this stuff." Not thank you for spending your entire Saturday. Just you're good at this stuff. Like I was a vendor she'd booked. The one time I said I couldn't make it to a Sunday dinner because I had a deadline, my mother's voice went flat over the phone. "Your brother drives 40 minutes to get here, Ivy. You live 10 minutes away. I don't ask for much." I came. I always came. There's a specific moment when I knew something had shifted inside me, but I didn't recognize it for what it was until much later. It was a Tuesday in January, 8 months before the anniversary dinner. I was at my parents' house watching Brody and Harper for the 3rd time that month, because Ashley had a work event and Kevin had a client dinner, and my mother had her church planning meeting, which, she pointed out, she couldn't skip, because she was the one who organized the agenda. I was sitting on my parents' living room floor building a block tower with Harper, while Brody narrated a battle happening on the couch. It was 7:30 at night. I had a client revision due at 9. Nobody had told me when Kevin was coming to get the kids. My phone buzzed. Client asking for an ETA on the revision. I texted back, working on it, couple hours, and felt the specific exhaustion of a person who cannot figure out how she got so far from the life she was supposed to be living. I want to tell you what my secret was, because it matters. 2 years before the anniversary dinner, I started taking online courses in instructional design. I'd always been interested in how people learn, how information gets structured so it actually sticks. I took the first course on a whim, with money I'd set aside from a freelance project. I didn't tell anyone, partially because I didn't want to hear my mother ask if that was really a career path. Partially because it felt like something that was entirely mine, in a life where very little was. I was good at it. Genuinely good. I built a portfolio over 18 months. Sample curricula, interactive modules, a full course framework I designed for a hypothetical nonprofit. I applied to a graduate program at the College of Charleston in instructional design and learning technology. I was accepted in March. I told no one. There is a woman named Eleanor who matters in this story. She's my father's older sister, and my family regards her the way people regard a houseplant they forgot to water. She went through a difficult divorce in her 40s, moved to Savannah, Georgia, and built a second career as a ceramics teacher at a community arts center. My mother finds her embarrassing. Eleanor never quite figured out her priorities, she says. Which I now understand to mean Eleanor chose herself. And my mother has never forgiven her for it. I called Eleanor every other Sunday. My mother didn't know. Eleanor was the one I told when I got accepted. We were on the phone for an hour. She cried a little. I cried more. She said, "Ivy, this is what you're supposed to be doing. I felt it in every email you've ever sent me about your work." She was also the one who, 6 weeks before the anniversary dinner, said something I keep coming back to. "You're allowed to want things, sweetheart. Wanting things is not a character flaw. It just feels like one when the people around you have spent years treating it like one." I had until May 15th to confirm my enrollment. The anniversary dinner was on April 22nd. Let me tell you about that night. My parents' 35th anniversary party was held at a private room in a restaurant my mother had been trying to get a reservation at for 2 years. The kind of place with small portions and large candles and servers who refill your water without being asked. 60 guests. Old family friends, neighbors from 3 different decades, my father's former colleagues. I spent the 2 weeks before it helping coordinate. I contacted the restaurant about dietary restrictions. I organized the slideshow of family photos my mother wanted displayed on a screen near the entrance. I hand-addressed 30 of the 60 envelopes, because my mother's handwriting had gotten shaky and she didn't want anyone to notice. I drove across Columbus 3 separate times picking up things she'd forgotten to order. The night of the dinner, I arrived an hour early to make sure everything was set up correctly. I wore a green dress I'd bought on sale 6 months ago, and never had an occasion to wear. My mother looked at it when I walked in and said, "Is that new? It's a little bright." Then she turned back to the florist to approve the centerpieces. My brother arrived at the start time. Exactly. With Ashley in a black dress that got 3 compliments in the first 10 minutes, and Brody and Harper in coordinating outfits that looked like they'd been professionally styled. My mother hugged Ashley for a long time. The evening went the way these evenings go. I circulated. I refilled things when they ran low. At one point, a woman I didn't recognize touched my arm and asked if I was with the event staff. Before I could answer, my mother appeared and said, "Oh no, this is my daughter Ivy. She helps with things." The woman smiled politely and turned to talk to someone else. Helps with things. After the main course, my father stood up. The room quieted. He talked about 35 years of marriage, about building a family, about gratitude. My mother looked beautiful and emotional in the way she does when she knows people are watching. Kevin and Ashley held hands. Brody had fallen asleep against Kevin's shoulder. I stood near the edge of the room with a linen napkin in my hand. "And to celebrate this milestone," my father said, pausing the way he does for effect, "your mother and I want to share some news. We've booked a 2-week trip to Italy, Tuscany, Rome, the Amalfi Coast. We want the whole family there." The room responded the way you'd expect. Ashley gasped. Kevin laughed in surprise. Several guests started clapping. My father beamed. The whole family. I felt it move through me. That specific, cautious hope that probably should have been more guarded than it was. I let myself imagine 2 weeks of not being the person who handles everything. I let myself imagine that when he said the whole family, he had actually meant me, too. I stepped slightly forward. Dad, that's incredible. When do we leave? The shift in his expression was fast. He glanced at my mother. Something passed between them that I had seen 1,000 times and never properly named until that moment. Ivy, he said. We weren't really counting on you for the trip. The room didn't go completely silent. Conversations continued around us, but the people close enough to hear went quiet, and that was enough. What do you mean? I asked. I kept my voice even. I was very focused on keeping my voice even. My mother stepped in smoothly. Sweetheart, Kevin and Ashley need this trip to reconnect. The kids need their grandparents there. Someone needs to be with Brody and Harper while the adults have some time. You understand. Kevin was looking at the table. Ashley was examining her wine glass. You're saying I'm not invited, I said. We're saying you're needed here, my mother said. Which is a different sentence, but she said it like it wasn't. An older man nearby, one of my father's former colleagues, turned to his wife and murmured something. His wife put her hand on his arm. I didn't hear what they said. I didn't need to. I said, I understand. I smiled. I had a very practiced smile for these situations. I excused myself and walked to the restroom and stood at the sink for 4 minutes looking at my own reflection, which is not something I usually do. The rest of the evening I moved on autopilot. I said the right things to the right people. I helped with the final cleanup while Ashley and Kevin got the kids into the car. When the last guests were gone, I gathered my things. My mother caught me near the door. Don't be dramatic about this, Ivy. You know how these things work. I know, I said. I know exactly how these things work. I meant it differently than she took it. I drove home and found the email from the College of Charleston still open on my laptop. The confirmation deadline page. I had 11 days. I called Eleanor. It was past 11. She answered immediately. I told her everything. My voice stayed level until I got to the part where my mother said you're needed here, and then it didn't. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Ivy, when does the semester start? August, I told her. Do you need somewhere to stay while you figure out housing? I hadn't even let myself think that far. I said, I can't just. Yes, she said. You can. You've been telling yourself you can't for 5 years. That's different from actually being unable to. I hung up at 1 in the morning. I didn't sleep. By 4 in the morning, I had drafted an email to the admissions office confirming my enrollment. I didn't send it yet, but I wrote it. The next day my brother called. He asked if I was okay. It was the first time he had asked me that in a while, and I think the question surprised both of us. Kev, I said, did you know I was going to be left out of the Italy trip before Dad announced it? Silence. Ashley mentioned it, he finally said. Mom had talked to her about it. I thought. He stopped. I thought you probably expected it. He thought I probably expected it. I need to tell you something, I said. I got into a graduate program in Charleston. I deferred it because I was trying to figure out how to make it work with everything here. But I'm going to confirm enrollment. I leave in July. More silence. That's great, Kevin said. He sounded like someone who wasn't sure if great was the right word. I won't be available to watch the kids while you're in Italy, I said. I wanted to let you know directly. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, Mom's not going to like this. I know, I said. She didn't. I went to my parents' house 2 days later. My mother was in the kitchen making a grocery list. My father was reading at the kitchen table. I stood in the doorway and told them I was enrolling in a graduate program in South Carolina and would be moving in July, and that I wouldn't be available to watch Brody and Harper during the Italy trip. My mother set down her pen, very deliberately. Ivy, you can't be serious. I've been accepted to a competitive program, I said. I deferred a year already. I can't defer again. Why didn't you tell us? My father asked. Because I knew this would happen, I said. My mother stood up. This is unbelievably selfish. Ashley is counting on you. We all made plans around you. You made plans about me, I said. Without asking me. That's different. My mother's expression shifted into something colder. If you walk away from this family right now, Ivy, you will regret it. I hope you know that. I looked at her for a long moment. I love you, I said. But I'm going. My father said nothing. He looked at his book. I don't know if that was worse or better than if he'd said something. The weeks after that were a specific kind of difficult. My mother called repeatedly. Each voicemail was designed to land in a slightly different spot. One day, it was guilt. Your niece and nephew are asking why Aunt Ivy doesn't want to see them anymore. The next day, it was dismissal. I hope this little adventure is worth throwing your family away. Once it was a longer voicemail where she talked about everything she had done for me growing up. Itemized with emphasis. Ashley sent a text that said, "I'm honestly shocked. I thought you loved those kids." I read it twice and then put my phone face down on my desk and worked for 3 hours without looking at it. Kevin texted once. Just, "I get it. I think. I'm sorry we made assumptions." That one I kept. I confirmed my enrollment in Charleston. I found a studio apartment near campus through a graduate student housing board. I started telling my freelance clients about my transition timeline. I gave away my furniture, kept my work equipment, and arranged to store 3 boxes at Eleanor's house in Savannah until I found a permanent place. The week before I left Columbus, I drove to my parents' house one last time. My mother was home. My father was at a golf game. I sat with her at the kitchen table where I had sat for 29 years of meals and homework and conversations that went nowhere, and I tried to tell her something true. "I'm not leaving because I don't love this family," I said. "I'm leaving because staying was making me disappear." She looked at me across the table. For a moment, I thought she might actually hear it. Then she said, "I don't know where we went wrong with you." I drove away from that house and let myself cry for exactly one exit on the highway. And then I stopped, because I had packing to do. Eleanor met me in Savannah for 2 days before I drove the rest of the way to Charleston. We ate dinner at a place near the waterfront, and she told me about the first year after her divorce, how strange it felt to be choosing herself after so many years of arranging her life around other people's comfort. "It gets less strange," she said. "And then, one day, it just feels like breathing." Charleston is a different kind of city than Columbus. Smaller in some ways, bigger in others. The air smells different near the water. My studio apartment was small and hot in August and had a kitchen the size of a hallway and a window that looked out onto a courtyard with an oak tree in it. I made coffee in the mornings and sat by that window and thought about the fact that every single hour of my day was mine to decide what to do with. That sensation took some getting used to. My program started in late August. 12 other students, a mix of ages and backgrounds. A professor named Dr. Vasquez who had a habit of asking questions and then waiting far longer than comfortable for someone to answer. I sat in the first seminar and felt, for the first time in years, like I was exactly where my brain wanted to be. I was not ahead of everyone. That was humbling. Some of my classmates had years of instructional design experience in corporate environments. Some had master's degrees in adjacent fields. I had 18 months of self-taught coursework and a portfolio I'd built in stolen hours. But Dr. Vasquez looked at my portfolio on the second week and said, "You have an instinct for learner empathy. That's not teachable. Everything else is." I wrote that down. I still have it. My family went to Italy. I know this because Kevin sent me a photo of Brody on a gondola in Venice with the caption, "Wish you were here." I stared at it for a while. I wasn't sure if he meant it literally or diplomatically. I sent back a thumbs up and a photo of my view from the campus library, which overlooks a harbor. Ashley texted once from Rome. Harder than expected with the kids, Brody had a meltdown at the Colosseum. I did not respond to that one. My mother sent a postcard. An actual physical postcard, which surprised me. It said, "Italy is beautiful. I hope you're doing well in school." No signature, but she had addressed it to my apartment, which meant she'd looked up my address, which meant something, even if I wasn't sure what. The semester moved quickly in the way semesters do when the work is actually interesting. I finished 2 major projects that went into my portfolio. I got a part-time remote position with an ed tech startup through a connection Dr. Vasquez made. The pay was modest, but it was work in my actual field, which was new. I also started writing again. Not client work. A blog, anonymous at first, about the process of deciding to pursue a different life after years of being the person everyone else's life was organized around. I wasn't trying to build an audience, I was trying to figure out what I thought. But people found it. Slowly, then less slowly, then less slowly. Comments from women who recognized something in it. From people who had made their own versions of the same choice, or who were still trying to decide whether they were allowed to. One comment stayed with me. A woman wrote, "I thought the price of leaving was losing the people. I didn't realize the price of staying was losing myself." I read that 3 times. In November, Kevin called. Not a text, a call. He asked how school was going, which was different from his earlier calls, which had been about logistics or my mother's feelings. I told him about the ed tech job, about a project I was developing on trauma-informed curriculum design. He listened. He asked follow-up questions. I wasn't sure Kevin had ever asked me a follow-up question about my work before. "I've been thinking," he said at the end of the call, "about how much you did. For the kids, for mom and dad." I don't think I ever actually saw it while it was happening. I didn't know what to do with that. I said, "It's okay." Then I corrected myself. "Actually, it wasn't okay, but I appreciate you saying that." "Fair," he said. We talked for another 20 minutes. It was the longest conversation we'd had in years that wasn't about a family event. My mother and I talk now, occasionally. Short calls, careful ones. She asks about my program. I give her condensed answers. She doesn't ask about my life in Charleston, the people I've met, or the work I'm doing, or what the city looks like in the morning. I don't offer. We have arrived at a kind of civil distance that is healthier than the proximity we had before, even if it looks colder from the outside. My father emailed me in December. 3 sentences. "I saw the college posted one of your projects on their website. It looked very professional. I'm glad you found something that suits you." I printed that email. I put it on the corkboard above my desk, next to my enrollment confirmation and a photo Eleanor sent me of her ceramics display at the Arts Center in Savannah. The 3 things I look at when I'm having a hard day. It's February now. Outside my window, the oak tree is still there. Different in winter, more visible without the leaves. I have 8 months left in my program. The ed tech startup offered to extend my contract. I've been asked to present at a regional conference in the spring. Something about learner-centered design in community education. I said yes before I finished reading the email. I am not going home for the holidays. Not this year. Maybe not next year. Kevin brought the kids to visit me in October, just him and Brody and Harper, without telling my mother in advance. We walked around the historic district. Brody was obsessed with the fountain he found near the market. Harper held my hand the whole afternoon. I don't know if they'll remember it, but I will. That night, after they left, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and thought about the woman I was, 2 years ago. Standing in my parents' kitchen at 7 in the morning, making a ham for Easter while everyone else slept in. I wasn't angry at her. I understood why she stayed as long as she did. It felt like loyalty. It felt like love. It took me a long time to understand that what it actually was a very effective way of teaching the people around me that my time, my plans, and my ambitions were negotiable. They are not negotiable. They are not negotiable. I know that now. I'm still learning to live like I know it. From a psychological standpoint, what I experienced has a name. When one person in a family consistently absorbs the unspoken costs, the planning, the labor, the emotional regulation, while others receive the benefits without acknowledgement, that imbalance doesn't happen by accident. It gets built slowly, one small assumption at a time, until the person doing the absorbing has forgotten they were ever allowed to say no. That process tends to target the person who is most agreeable, most available, and least likely to create conflict. Usually it's the younger child. Often it's a woman. Almost always it's someone who has learned that their belonging in the family is conditional on their usefulness to it. Here's what I want you to take from this. Leaving is not abandonment. In most cases, it's the first honest thing a person has done in years. And the family members who call it selfish are usually the ones who benefited most from you not leaving sooner. You are not a supporting character in your own life. You are not the help. You don't have to earn your place at the table by setting it first. I learned that later than I should have. But I learned it. And now I'm building something in a city that doesn't know who I used to be, and every single day I get to decide what comes next. That's everything. And it's enough. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long. Not in a self-punishing way, more like trying to understand the mechanics of it. How a person can spend years giving and somehow convince themselves that's just who they are, rather than recognizing it as something that was slowly decided for them by other people's comfort. The truth is, nobody sat me down and told me my role. It happened in the accumulation of small moments. The first time I moved my car without being asked twice. The first time I swallowed a no because I didn't want to make things difficult. The first time I showed up early and stayed late and left without anyone noticing. Each one of those moments was a vote I cast for a version of myself I didn't actually choose. And the people around me, my parents, my brother, Ashley, they weren't monsters. They were just people who had learned that I would handle it, whatever it was, and they stopped asking whether I was okay with that. That's the thing about cause and effect that nobody talks about honestly. The consequences of our choices don't always arrive dramatically. Sometimes they arrive as a Tuesday night, when you're sitting on someone else's floor building blocks, with a child who isn't yours, while your own deadline ticks down on your phone, and you realize you cannot remember the last time anyone asked what you needed. I used to think that staying was the ethical choice. That being dependable, being available, absorbing the inconvenience, so the people I loved didn't have to. That was what love looked like. But there's a version of that story that's less flattering and more accurate. I was afraid. Afraid that if I stopped being useful, I would stop being wanted. And so I made myself indispensable in a way that had nothing to do with being loved and everything to do with being needed, which are not the same thing at all. Eleanor understood this before I did. She'd lived a version of it herself, and she came out the other side with her ceramics studio and her students and her life in Savannah, which my mother called a waste, and which I now recognize as evidence. Eleanor's life was proof that you could want things, pursue them, and not be destroyed by the people who called that selfish. It took courage to watch her and let that proof actually land. Courage is the part that doesn't get talked about enough in these stories. Not the dramatic kind, not the speech in the gallery or the confrontation in the kitchen, the quiet kind, the courage it takes to fill out an application when you're not sure you deserve to be accepted, the courage to make one phone call to a woman who actually sees you and admit that you are not okay, the courage to say I'm going out loud to people who will try to talk you back into staying. Ivy made that choice. And I think what mattered most wasn't the graduate program, wasn't Charleston, wasn't any external thing. It was the decision to treat her own life as something worth building deliberately, on purpose, in the direction she actually wanted to go. That is not selfishness. That is the most responsible thing a person can do, for themselves, and ultimately for everyone around them, because a person who has been slowly hollowed out by obligation has nothing real left to give anyway. You can't pour from an empty cup, and the people who truly see you will never ask you to try.